several goals. One is to undermine transatlantic unity. He is seeking to undermine, through that undermining of transatlantic unity, support for Ukraine, which is his top objective, is to, in essence, to wipe Ukraine off the map as we know it today. He is also, disinformation is also used for internal use as well, including in Russia, to achieve domestic objectives, to be able to create to be able to put forth his policy, what he wants, in a space that's closed. And so he's basically messaging at home. So he's got an internal objectives with this information, and then external objectives that he's had for quite some time in terms of propaganda. And it's not only just transatlantic, it's not just in neighboring states, it's a global effort by him to shape an agenda that achieves what he believes are his objectives as an autocratic ruler in Russia, but also clearly Kremlin objectives right now. And so I think it's a very dangerous period, and particularly when he's using information or language related to nuclear weapons and use of, it creates challenges not only at home but globally. It's already, when you have, as there is right now, both high inflation, you have energy challenges, and you have already volatile political scenes in countries like we saw in Italy with the recent election of what we would consider to be a pro-fascist party leader. You realize and recognize in Europe that, well, one, that there is vulnerability politically to this type of messaging at a time when people feel impacted economically. And more often than not, it's economic issues that are the ones that voters care the most about, whether in the United States or whether you're in Europe. And so it does have an impact. And so I think that's the reason why you see Russia cranking up its propaganda machine, and then supporters of Russia and Mr. Putin in these locations, they are also echoing exactly what he is saying, and using it to try to achieve their own domestic political interests. And I think it's a mutually reinforcing challenge that faces democracies when you have disinformation as a cause du jour of this moment, this day. Where you have emerging democracies that have, we've seen backsliding, like Viktor Orban, where you see leaders in these countries taking on the playbook of Mr. Putin and other autocrats to achieve their objectives. So yeah, there's always a danger of backsliding, and so there's the importance of addressing those challenges early on, meeting those challenges even when you have a situation like Hungary, whether it's in Brussels, the EU taking on Hungary, or other partners, including the United States, speaking directly to democratic backsliding, and the need to address rule of law issues as soon as possible and not wait. There's a certain resilience among a certain population in the United States who are concerned about disinformation, concerned about lies that have a direct impact on their lives, whether we're talking about health like COVID-19, or whether we're talking about national security threats. And so it's a challenge. You still, for example, in support of Ukraine, majority of Americans support Ukraine and want to see the United States continue to provide that support. But there's a segment of the population that is susceptible to propaganda, even from US news outlets, leading figures that are parroting what Mr. Putin is saying. And they've been doing this for quite some time. And it's very dangerous. It's as if these are the same group of people that really don't want to see governance or democracy succeed and threaten, including our elections. And so we'll have a US election will be coming up in a couple of weeks. And it's not about whether majority of Americans think one way or the other. We also have our own challenges in terms of how congressional districts are actually made, or gerrymandered. That's a U.S. term for sort of making these districts more closely hewed to one political party or the other. And in this case, you may have a majority, an overwhelming majority of the American population that disagrees with the positions that we're hearing coming from the far right, or those that support Mr. Putin. And so it's an imbalance even in the U.S. political system. What we have found is authoritarians and their like, those that support weakening of democracy, can exploit democracy and the democratic structures to achieve political objectives. And we need to think more about how we strengthen the infrastructure of democracy to be able to make it more resilient to autocrats.